National Executive Committee of the NRM having a meeting with the Army Council, the Defense and Army Council, and the Army High Command. We'll be discussing those in the next few minutes. To introduce my team tonight, Andrew Mujuni Mwenda, he's Chief Executive Officer of The Independent magazine. Andrew, very nice to have you on.
And also old man of the clan.
You've never
especially all the Somalis. I hope our listeners can see how I am only one dressed in an African wear. All these guys are dressed like a Muzungu. Agents of imperialism.
Thank you for the little speech there.
Can the cameraman capture my full attire, please?
Huh?
I want the viewers.
Stop the speech. The introduction is done.
But don't forget to capture my... now it can be
Timothy Kaligera. Timothy, very nice to have you.
No comment.
Timothy is the Chief Executive at the Kampala Express. Editor and publisher of the Kampala Express.
No comment.
Online publication.
No comment.
No comment. And of course, Fanapito Ekomoloit.
Corporate
and Legal Affairs Director at Nile Breweries, Eddie Inbe.
I think, Onapito, you are real and old man out. The three of us come from the same village. So we could have hosted this show in Rutoro. We come from Kanyandai village.
Gentlemen, the story that's gripping public discussion on social media, mainstream media, is the story of what is happening in the Uganda police force. Andrew, what is going on with these arrests, this wave of arrests?
My own interpretation is that the story is in the papers, but we are not seeing it. This is not an investigation into activities of police force. This is a quarrel between Uganda and Rwanda, which Uganda is playing out in the media. Because remember that Uganda and Rwanda essentially have both formal and informal channels through which, if there are matters of mutual interest or conflict, where they can be resolved. But for the Ugandan security agencies to go to the media and say it's arresting police officers for colluding with the government of Rwanda and the security agencies to kidnap Rwandan refugees in Uganda and send them to Kigali. That tells us very little about the problems in the Uganda police force, which are many. It tells us a lot about the relationship between Uganda and Rwanda.
You're a very good friend of people both in Kigali and Kampala. What is that relationship?
But that is why I am also confused, because from my own information, there have been no formal representations by the government of Uganda through the existing diplomatic channels to the government of Rwanda to complain about Rwanda government running security rings inside Uganda in collaboration with Ugandan police officers to arrest Rwandan dissidents and send them back. So there has been no diplomatic complaint between the two. There are informal channels of communication. From my own information on the side of Rwanda, there have been no such informal representations to the government of Rwanda. So for the Ugandan intelligence services and the Uganda government to play this problem inside the media, clearly knowing, by the way, that Kale Kayihura, by ethnicity, is a Mnyarwanda, and Paul Kagame...
He's a Mfumbera.
Well, whatever you want to say, he's a Mnyarwanda, and Paul Kagame was, the president of Rwanda, was his best man at his wedding. I get the sense that also the enemies of Kale Kayihura within the establishment in Uganda have found something which they want to use to accuse him either of being a mole, of working on behalf of a foreign power, in order to eliminate him. What is surprising to me also and worrisome is that President Museveni has accepted the allegations
and
of Kale's enemies against Kale. But this is not about these police officers, I can tell you. One of the incidents they are talking about happened in 2013.
Yes, the one involving Joel Agoma,
why
the
bring
former
it
head
up
of
in
PSA.
2017? So the real discussion in Uganda should be, why would Uganda adopt such a hostile posture towards Rwanda?
But it's a little bit more than that, Timothy. This story starts playing out with a woman called Mbabazi Muhoza over the murder of Andrew Felix Kawesi on March 17th this year. And there is a standoff between the police and the Internal Security Organization at Halunguja House. And even when these arrests begin, when the initial leaks of these arrests and the CMI involvement begin, everybody is focusing on the murder of Andrew Felix Kawesi. How it turns into a Rwanda affair is when they appear in court, because nobody expected that this would turn into a Rwanda affair until they appeared in court. So there appears to be a little bit more. And would you expect that you can pick up 8 senior police officers, charge them, by another security agency? And isn't there something more that we haven't seen yet?
Well, we discussed this on the KFM show on Friday, and I guess Andrew's angle begins to speak the truth. But even if Andrew is right about, which I think he is, about there being tension in Rwanda, where the security agencies either are trying to play up, or even if you say Kyle Kahira's enemies are trying to use to undermine him, there still must be an explanation for why, in the first place, relations between Uganda and Rwanda that had been, more or less like warming up over the last 7 years suddenly take this nosedive. And why would Uganda be playing this game in the media, knowing how sensitive it is? I don't think there's any more sensitive relationship between Uganda and a foreign country than Rwanda's. The British Americans, those are important but sensitive with all the consequences, all the history and all the tension. For Uganda to do this must mean that Uganda either suspects that Rwanda is doing something behind the scenes and they're trying to call Rwanda's bluff by going public, or there's another story which, as I did say on Friday, might point to Burundi.
But, Tim, why couldn't it be that Uganda maybe has done many things about Rwanda which are dirty, and now to cover its own guilt, it may raise these issues in order to...
To answer your question, which is a valid one, is that if it did those things, especially, let's say, if it failed to honor some of its bilateral agreements in areas, routine matters of border control, or let's say, trade or whatever, they would use the same back channels. There would be no reason to escalate such a crisis to this state security and military levels when all it is just Rwanda is saying we haven't paid us rent for building ABC. So it still seems to me that there's a story not being told, either an invisible hand of Rwanda.
You never had Uganda saying that Ensongi was for Busungu.
All that is agreed.
You could have said it in Ruto and you'd have performed much better than you're doing.
but like I'm saying, all this is, like I said, it is the fact that it took a lot of diplomatic work and behind the scenes activity to get Uganda and Rwanda to reconcile after the fallout in 2005.
Timothy,
why would you...
Timothy, the East African, in its story this week, did speak to both the Rwandan High Commissioner here, Frank Mugambaje, and spoke to Henry Okello Oryem, who's the Minister for International Relations. And they're saying anybody would, actually in the words of Okello Oryem, he doesn't envisage that anybody would be as careless as to try and rattle these relations at this time. Mugambaje says there are channels through which you communicate, and he says, in his own words, that if it is a matter involving Joel, the guy who was taken from here, the former AD to Kagame, he says all the proper channels were followed. And as far as he was concerned, there was nothing that should have escalated.
I can confirm that.
To the state.
I can confirm that. Mutabazi was arrested
Mutabazi, Joel Mutabazi.
And an arrest warrant issued by Interpol.
Yes, but Honor, relations don't just fall apart like this. You don't expect... There are many other stories about the Rwanda-Uganda angle. The East African did run another story involving the businessman Tribert Rujugiro and his dealings here and what guarantees he had gotten to establish businesses here. There's been talk about activities in Kiboga and dissidents disappearing and running here. So that the tensions between Uganda and Rwanda, or potential tensions between Uganda and Rwanda, is not in doubt. But that those tensions can play out with Uganda's security agencies. The CMI on one hand, IS on the other, the Uganda police on the other. Tells
the bigger story. First of all, Andrew said I'm the odd man out. So you can imagine I don't understand these relations where
they happen in our village in Western Uganda.
Rwanda on one side of the Western
and all these guys could be
Banyarwanda. And friend is in the studio.
and the three guys could be Banyarwanda.
For me, what I would only read into is perfect timing for Yoweri Museveni to remind the country once more that there is only one sheriff in town. Because I'm sure this is good for him to say. It's only him who could afford to have sort of a conflict between different arms of the armed forces, and he calls them to order. He gets anybody arrested. Ugandans remember the famous uncoordinated movement of troops under Bote II. I think if it was not Yoweri Museveni in charge, there would have been a shootout the way we have been told. There was tension at some woman's house. Then people have been arrested who have been very powerful in town.
alleged deployment around the residence of the
so I
IGP,
think
which has
that
been
was
denied.
not true.
in
Yes,
the
it has been
context
denied.
of the of whether Yoweri Museveni should continue in power or not, I think his backers will say, you see, this country is so fragile, and I think it is. Perhaps
So are you suggesting the president could be deliberately simulating a crisis, both regional and domestic, in order to justify his continuity?
I don't know whether it's deliberate, but the message is clear. That it's only him. If indeed Kale is in trouble, who could get Kale in? Who knew Kale could be in trouble?
Let me flip that question and put it back to you.
Because first of all,
Why
we
do
are stretching
you-
this so
Yes.
much into Rwanda. So far, to the ordinary person, I don't think Rwanda is featuring this. We are just seeing CMI arresting police officers, and I mean they appear helpless, yet everyone was terrified of them only yesterday. So it's just an
Yes,
interesting
Andrew, let me
thing.
flip the same question. Why would President Museveni allow this to play out the way it is playing out? I mean, you're picking up the most senior police officers. There's tension at Naguru at the police headquarters. Everybody's, there's been very poor communication between the police, the former channels of the police, and the chieftains of military intelligence in terms of who do you want, when do you want them, how do they get picked?
You see, it is very difficult for me to know what is going on in the president's head unless he invites me for coffee at watch.
You advise him.
Or I'm not his advisor, but maybe
But you speak to him
I give him my opinions, yes. And I must say President Museveni is a very good listener. It's very difficult for me to know what is going on in his mind. But what I can see as a person who talks to the principals on both sides is that the knowledge I have is that Rwanda has made a number of diplomatic presentations to Uganda about the SGR, about freedom landing rights for the airline to fly from here to London. They have had problems with Rwandan students who came here and said government wanted to force them to repeat the senior 6 exams, and the Ugandan intelligence went and coached them or Ugandan officials went and coached them to change, and claimed that Rwanda was trying to send them to force them to join M23. So Rwanda has
the 15 guys who appeared at Old Kampala Police,
at Old Kampala Police Station
some years back.
So over this period, you remember the question of Ruzijero, who has a business here, and there is sufficient evidence that he supports RNC, which supports FDLR. So if there was any aggrieved party, to my knowledge, who should be complaining, whose media should be running stories of this nature, it should be Rwanda. Actually, I'm surprised that Uganda is the one now claiming that Rwanda is running errands around the Kampala.
Yeah, but why would anybody let this play out the way it is playing out, especially for President Yoweri Museveni? You're fomenting a crisis where the security agencies are in public debate in a manner they have never been for a long time.
If we have experts in geopolitical posturing, that those experts can tell us. I cannot understand why Uganda, because it's a very sensitive matter, to accuse another country of running security rings inside your country, which is, one, Rwanda is a neighbor of Uganda. Rwanda is together with Uganda in the Coalition of the Willing. It's together with Uganda in the Kagera Basin Organization. It's together with Uganda in the East African Community. It's together with Uganda in
the Nile Basin Initiative and
in so many things, and of course there are so many historic ties. So for the intelligence organizations of Uganda to be leaking information that there is a criminal gang within the Uganda police force closely tied to the Inspector General of Police, kidnapping people and taking them to Rwanda, and that is a story we're leaking to the mass media. I tell you, that confuses me, because I think it would be the last thing government of Uganda operatives should do. What if Rwanda was also to give its side of the story? And Rwanda, by the way, has kept quiet, and you can see that it's not funding this, assuming Rwanda was also to give its own side of the story.
Or maybe it will. But Timothy, let me ask. There's been talk.
By the way, let me finish. Yes. Especially in circumstances, this case of Mutabazi, I know it very well.
Yes,
but it was not an illegal arrest.
No, but beyond that, Andrew, my question is, why would President Museveni allow this? Because, like Ona said, the major debate among many Ugandans, the Rwandan angle, we can discuss it because we know a little bit more. The major debate is the police and its leadership are under some kind of siege. Some people have said Kaihura is at the end of his glory days, must have been crowned with his celebration of 50 years of John Kale, his father, in Kisoro the other day, where the president was chief guest. To go from that just the previous week to this kind of discussion today, tell
After the
something
president
more happening.
praised Kale
Yes.
when he was in Kisoro, I got worried. If you see Museveni reprimand a public official publicly, then you know you still have his favor. But if Museveni is very kind to you and generous, the way he was with Kale in Kisoro, that may be an indicator of your days being numbered.
He had said he had moved actually on the opposite of what you're saying in March in March this year. When he went to the home,
I should inform you, President
yes.
Museveni renewed Kale's contract 5 months before it expired, so which was unusual. And and 2 days after he renewed it, Kaweesi was killed. A day after Kaweesi was killed, the president came and said, "I know there are a lot of criminals in the police force.
Clean up your force.
Yeah,
Clean up your
force."
house.
But I just
So what
So the messages were very confusing. Why renew the contract of a man whom you're accusing of presiding over a police filled with criminals? Well, perhaps it could be that Museveni is willing to tolerate Kale's weaknesses on the presence of criminals within the police force, because Kale plays another important role within the Ugandan system, and that is as the political protector.
Would you rather that when you're having a very intense debate about remove of age limit and the police is at the end of it?
My personal view is age limit too small to involve us at this level of interforce tensions. Nothing domestic. My suspicion is strongly over the question of, number one, what is Rwanda's relationship with Burundi? Answer, very bad since the attempted military coup of May 2015. Where's Uganda's position vis-a-vis Burundi? Sort of like a supporter of, or at least perceived as having helped, retain a President
As a patron of Burundi.
Yes, from the peace talks to also allegedly Uganda flew President Nkurunziza from Dar es Salaam, that East African Summit, back home. Essentially that. So the suspicion might be, rightly or wrongly, Rwanda perceiving Uganda as a friend of Rwanda's new enemy. That's the nearest. If the Rwanda angle comes in, that's the nearest. I don't think, like you say, President Museveni is cautious. That relationship took so much work to build. It is so beneficial. There just cannot be a reason for Uganda and Rwanda to suddenly have relations flare up this openly in the media, except if there's a lot of smoke, where there's a lot of fire, where there is this smoke we see. It's
but these two countries have clashed before. Kisangani 1, Kisangani 2 in the late 1990s.
And then 2005, the border
incident.
Yes,
2005, the border incident, and you have a strenuous repair of relations to get them to where they are now.
What's that? Let's just, okay, Uganda is leaking, and try and put yourself in the mind. Why would you leak these things in the media? To achieve what point? To embarrass Rwanda? Is it worth the price? What's there to achieve? What's the end game in all this? That's what I'm saying. That
Peter has worked at State House. You can give us
No, look,
the kind of
you managed media State House.
What is the diplomatic intrigue behind all
you
this?
guys, maybe because you have cross-border relations, you are trying to overstretch. To me, all politics is domestic. I think President Museveni right now is perceived, perhaps wrongly, by his opponents to be under siege. And indeed, there have been some kind of even NRM MPs feeling the pressure of people who are opposed to removing age limit. It needs especially its core strength, which is the armed forces, everyone to be working full blast. And there is no better way than having this attention, people wanting to get favor. And I think if some people had been dampened in the intelligence, just hold on, dampened by the perception that Kale was having too much power, I'm sure now their chests are out. So they are working, and they have been the most effective organs, the ISO, in terms of political mobilization. This is the best gift the president has given.
But Onapito,
so for me,
could the president achieve that without dragging Rwanda into it?
Exactly. It is too.
I don't know, but has he mentioned this about Rwanda? It's you follow at Rwanda.
No. In all the stories is there that
No. Let me put this on the record. These arrested police officers, 7 of them, and 2 other people, a Rwandan national and a Congolese national, when they appeared at the military court-martial on Friday, they were charged with kidnap of a former AD to President Paul Kagame. So that brings in
and repatriating him illegally
illegally to Rwanda. So at least an official court record puts Rwanda into play.
Yeah, but the president,
bigger
just
question
hold
is,
on, the
yes,
president knows that the moment at this right now to have a police force that is being diverted perhaps by money and want to serve foreign interests would be putting him at risk. So he wants to call everyone to order.
But this
The
happened in
police will move.
2013. It is not happened in 2017.
and
It's a 4-year-old story.
Yes, Andrew, what I have heard is that when you have changes, when President Museveni appointed new leaders of security agencies in Uganda, particularly you have a new Minister for Security Affairs, you have a new head at CMI, you have a new head at ISO, you have a new head at ESO, that Rwanda has not been able to pursue its dissidents, or its alleged dissidents, as it used to before. And it's been hitting roadblocks, and therefore, that has raised some of the complaints that we're seeing today.
That cannot be true, because remember that if Rwanda wants to do anything with Uganda, as the ambassador said in the East African community, Ambassador Mugambaji, there are channels
In the East African newspaper.
in the East African newspaper.
Yes.
There are channels through which the two countries, if they have a security challenge, they are both formal and informal channels through which they are able to resolve these issues. So Rwanda cannot send the people here to come and conduct operations unless there is an agreement, a kind of joint intelligence committee that handles this. The Rwanda Attorney General, the Rwanda.
I think you're wrong.
Of
I think you're wrong. There are cases where dissidents have been pursued here. One was snatched out of the jaws of the security agencies that were taking him away under the protection of the UN refugee system, only rescued because people would come here, get picked up, and taken across the border without following the proper channels.
That is not
But
true.
and how would you know if it was true?
But can I tell you, some of these issues have been raised. I have been waiting to see evidence of the individuals and the circumstances and things like that.
I think that will be coming out.
You should be able to talk to the ambassador Mugambaji. But you see, if these things were happening, I can tell you,
Andrew,
Uganda would have made a diplomatic representation to Rwanda and said, look, you are...
There are reports, Andrew, that say when President Museveni went to Brussels recently, leading a delegation of East African Community Trade Ministers to negotiate the economic partnership agreement with the European Union, that he allegedly received complaints from, among others, from diplomatic circles about what has been happening in the protection of refugees, particularly Rwandan refugees or asylum seekers in the country.
That is the point I'm making, Charles.
Yes.
That if the president of Uganda went to Brussels and the UNHCR complained to him about something to do with the Rwandan intelligence running operations inside Uganda and kidnapping Rwandan refugees and taking them to Rwanda, what is the thing the president of Uganda would do? He would ask his Minister of Foreign Affairs, give him a letter and a file and say, please go and have a conversation with President Kagame and his Minister of Foreign Affairs. They would give it to the police of Rwanda. They would do Uganda police and Uganda intelligence services would meet with Rwanda intelligence services and they compare us. You see, there is a diplomatic process through which nations resolve a matter like
Why
this.
hasn't that worked now?
Okay, that is the question you should present to the government of Uganda, and that's what I'm telling you. That at least I have
sources, what?
I have 100% information that there has been no diplomatic representation from Uganda to Rwanda on this complaint. So if the president received them in Brussels, why haven't the official channels, diplomatic channels of the government of Uganda engaged the government of Rwanda to discuss this
And
matter?
I think I have a bit of the answer to that. That's why I say that that fact that you can no longer use official or even credible informal channels must mean that at the core, the trust between Rwanda and Uganda at the official level has broken down to some degree.
Okay,
Which is why,
gentlemen, because we'll not come back to this subject, what does this all mean for General Kaihura? These arrests of his senior officers, and some of them his very close ADs.
Well, I can tell you, even if Kaihura is not removed as Inspector General of Police, it has really significantly diminished his prestige. It is going to be very difficult for him to exercise the kind of authority and power he has always exercised. They have really clipped his wings because, look, today the government of Uganda sent people to Algeria and they arrested his personal assistant, Barroso. He was arrested today in Algeria. People like Aguma, who has been the head of the police standards unit, or this guy Nixon, they have been some of Kale's right-hand persons. You get it? So if other intelligence organizations come and sideline Kale, and they go and pick the people closest to him and arrest them, accusing them of criminality, I mean, I think that Kale's personal prestige, even the power and influence he's able to wield in the security services, has been significantly diminished. It is going to be difficult.
Timothy, a quick one on Kale. What does it mean for him?
My personal view is that the least of your concerns should be Kale Kaihura. The wider question is the relationship between Uganda and Rwanda and where it's going. And Kahura is just a farm.
Connor?
Look, I told you there's only one sheriff in town. Not only yesterday, Tumukunde was considered finished. He was in jail. Today, I believe, is as powerful as you can think. So long as Yoweri Museveni decides that Kale should either remain powerful or not, he will be. If he wants him to stay powerful,
do you think the actions of the last week
much of the power,
the president has made a
much
decision?
of the power of people in the armed forces or in other office is about perception that they either have the president here or they don't have. Secondly, do they have the budget to run the operations? If the president decides they should have the budget, they will have.
And I just received, someone has been very kind to share with me a press release written by the police spokesperson, deputy spokesperson, on 22nd August 2013 about this arrest of Joel Mutabazi, and says a section of the media today carried stories that Uganda Police Force was involved in the abduction of Rwandan refugees using fake Interpol arrest warrants. This information is not correct. On August 14, 2013, the government of Rwanda sent a formal request for the arrest and extradition of one Lieutenant Joel Mutabazi, formerly a member of the Rwandan military. The request was sent by Interpol Kigali to Interpol Kampala. The request indicated that Lieutenant Mutabazi is a Rwandan national who is wanted by Rwanda National Police for the offense of armed robbery. The offense allegedly occurred at 10 p.m. on September 20th, 2011 in Kigali, Rwanda. Lieutenant Mutabazi is accused together with two other individuals that they robbed using AK-47 rifles. They robbed a bank Bankidu Kigali of 10 million Rwanda francs. Interpol Kigali requested Interpol Kampala to assist in locating the whereabouts of the suspect, arrest him and extradite him to Kigali in accordance with the law to face trial for the offenses committed. On August 20, 2013, at 3 p.m., Uganda police located the suspected fugitive at Unique Hotel in Chalwajala, a Kampala suburb. Police officers went to the hotel, identified themselves, the management, and arrested the suspect. They detained him at Jinja Road Police Station, pending further processing and formal extradition to Rwanda. During our inquiries, it was found out that the suspect had acquired refugee status and was under the protection of UNHCR and Office of the Prime Minister. The Minister of State for Disaster Preparedness, Honorable Musa Chweru, contacted the Inspector General of Police about Lieutenant Mutabazi's arrest and informed him that the suspect was under the protection of the Office of the Prime Minister. The Inspector General of Police requested Honorable Chweru for an official letter confirming whether the fugitive had acquired refugee status in Uganda. On receipt of the confirmation letter, the suspect was released to the Commissioner of Refugees in the Office of the Prime Minister on 21st August 2013. There was, therefore, no abduction, kidnap, or use of fake Interpol warrant of arrest, as alleged by a section of the media. This was a routine request from Interpol, which was subjected to due process and a decision made based on the laws of Uganda and relevant international conventions to which Uganda is party. It should be noted that the Uganda police force would not hand over the suspect to any country without going through the legal procedures of deportation or extradition as law requires. We are, however, aware that of the arrest of Innocent Kalisa. We are inquiring into the alleged arrest and detention. We are not aware of the arrest of Innocent Kalisa and inquiring into that arrest. But there is some contradiction in this letter. It says this Mutabazi was handed back to the Office of the Prime Minister. He was not transferred to Kigali. The question is, how did Mutabazi end up in a Kigali court where he has since been convicted and handed a life sentence? But we'll discuss that on another occasion. I think we need to move on with this story. We move on to a discussion about President Museveni and his mobilization towards the lifting of age limit. There was a meeting this ended week. The Army High Command met almost for 3 days, and the Defense Forces Council held a meeting. One of the most interestingly worded statements came out of that meeting by the Defense and UPDF spokesperson. There was a meeting of the National Executive Committee of the National Resistance Movement on Friday, which came with a resolution support the majority members of NEC who are members of Parliament on removing of age limit. There was a meeting with the Central Executive Committee. Interesting details about how the resolution that Richard Todwong shared, that there was literally no discussion. but that a resolution was issued. I want to start with you, Andrew, again. President Museveni seems to be rallying his troops finally and taking the control of the age limit lifting campaign. What do you say?
Yes, I think, one, President Yoweri Museveni, you know, if you look at the sources of authority of the NRM today, there are two pillars of loyalty in NRM, money and power. So loyalty is either bought or coerced. So the opposition will be clobbered. The NRM MPs will be given money and they will vote to amend the constitution to remove age limits. There is a lot of information on social media that there is a grassroots movement hostile to this amendment. It's certainly true, but I think that NRM MPs are deliberately steering their constituents, organizing them to shout against the lifting of age limits in order to cause Museveni to pay more money, because here they have asked for 500 million shillings. They cannot easily get that 500 million shillings from Museveni unless they have created a situation where he believes that the constituents are hostile and they need either to win them over or they need a retirement package. So that the amendment will go through, I can promise you, he will get 350 votes in that parliament. That I'm certain about. Perhaps the challenge people in the opposition need to address is 2021. But the amendment itself, I think, is a foregone conclusion.
You've watched all the reaction of the populace.
Yes.
Yes, in different parts of the country.
The population are not the one who's going to vote.
Yes, but does President Museveni want to get his thing in spite of what?
Because with time, I think that with time, Museveni... Remember, have you seen opinion polls of 2003 when they suggested lifting of term limits? My friend, less than 20% were in support of lifting of term limits. But with time, that's why this amendment came very early. Museveni is moving around the country on issues of land, but I'm sure he's consulting.
No, I'm told he spends the evenings and the earlier parts of the day doing mobilization for...
Well, perhaps not mobilization, but trying to understand. Museveni is very conscious of understanding popular feelings and how to change popular feelings. So he has the following tools. He will talk to church leaders, business leaders, teachers and other professionals, LC officials, NRM bigwigs in these places, win them over, trade pork. By the time we reach 2019, first of all, they will make the amendment early. This year, they will do the amendment. It is far away. So it will be the first defeat. By 2019, many people will begin resigning themselves to it. If we want to push a referendum, by the time they try to push a referendum, because I'm told the opposition are mobilizing 1.5 million signatures to force a referendum.
It's Abed Bwanika.
Abed Bwanika. So, but even then, by the time they hold a referendum, most people will be resigned to the inevitability of a Museveni presidency or amendment to the constitution to remove age limits. By the time all this happens. But before a referendum is done anyway, the constitution may be amended.
Timothy, someone is complaining that, is saying that I should give you more time. He thinks Andrew is taking up a lot more time than you are doing. If you see this series of meetings in Entebbe over the last week alone, and the reaction of the public towards this proposed amendment, the Majezi Bill as people are calling it, have we come to a definition of who wants this thing, how they want it, and how it will be delivered? I'm particularly interested in the meeting of the Army High Command and the Defense Forces Council.
All this discussion is just pointless. In fact, you should remove the amount of time for me to speak and give more of it to Andrew Onapito, because in January 1986, the age limit and term limits were removed before they began. You know, we spent so much time.
86 or 96?
86, basically, like Eria Kategaya said in Lusaka in 1984, during one of these Uganda, meetings at Independence, they said, the day we take power in Kampala, we shall rule Uganda for so long, they'll forget there was anything called parties.
Kategaya didn't write that in Impassion for
Freedom.
Freedom.
Yes, I know, but I'm saying he did one of these discussions. So in other words, we spent so much time discussing the nitty-gritties. The fact of the matter is, I'm just trying to be academic about this. Everything Museveni and power and on and on and on, and the fusing further and further state with the NRM is a foregone conclusion. We're discussing all these issues, and as Andrew said, let's just discuss what next for the opposition and the country. But anything Museveni, you think it's going to fail? The way just discussing every police force, as Onapito said, sheriffs, why do we waste hours of discussion on these things that are foregone?
And,
Before one, I mean,
actually, the waste of time is premised on the illusion that power belongs to the people. That's famous.
Article 1.
Article 1 of the code. It doesn't.
Hey,
Power
to
belongs
Who does
It belongs to.
just hold on. Power belongs to the armed. Almost everywhere in the world, power belongs to the armed. First and foremost, because in 1986, when Yoweri Museveni took power, he was not.
Let me find
Just
the
hold on.
let
He
me
was
find the
not-
statement of the
It was not based
of the
on
army.
consultation,
Forget the army
It was
statement.
based
There's just
on
nothing to discuss about the army.
acquiring enough armed force to,
Yes.
to subdue everyone. So
Charles just being swagger.
I think what the president has achieved in the recent weeks through those series of meetings is to show that even in the unlikely event that Parliament opposed this thing, it wouldn't stop him. I think he would still have something within the law that would allow the NRM organs and the armed organs to still declare that he's able and should continue to be the president.
This is what the military said after
What-
the
what-
Friday
what-
meeting.
what did they
Just a
say?
moment, just a
What
moment,
did
just a
they
moment.
say, Charles?
On the unnecessary anxiety arising from the current debate on the Constitution Amendment Bill 2017, the meetings urged all Ugandans to exchange views in a free, rational, and civil manner that does not in any way jeopardize national security and stability. Furthermore, the meetings recommended that these debates should be focused on our destiny as a country and by extension, the continent. Wait for the next paragraph.
There's no paragraph.
Listen, Timothy. It says, the meetings discussed and adopted the thesis written and presented by President and Commander-in-Chief as repositories of our mission, which will re-energize the understanding of our purpose. Our destiny lies in ensuring that our common interests take precedence over identity in order, and this diagnosis helps to correctly plot our journey towards the desired end state of preserving our sovereignty, maintaining our democracy, promoting our people's prosperity and strategic security through integration and promotion and efforts of patriotism,
What is
Pan-Africanism.
that?
I don't know,
This is the
Charles,
military.
you take
Writing.
script so serious in Uganda.
And it's
Stop
election
reading us.
military.
No, but I think Timothy is missing a very important point.
What
I
point?
think that Museveni calling the defense chiefs to talk to them and is a signal, of course, to the country of where actual power lies. Because remember that President Yoweri Museveni does not derive his power and authority to govern Uganda
From Article 1.
from the Constitution or from the elections. The Constitution and the elections provide legitimacy to his power. Museveni's power is derived and authority is derived from the role he played in the armed struggle to capture this power. Once he captured that power militarily, for as long as he lives and is president, his authority will be derived from there. All other institutions created after that, even their own heads, whether it's the DPP, whether it's the governor of the central bank, or whether it's the chief justice, who the Constitution gives independence, clearly understand where power resides. Until he retires or dies, regardless of what his wishes
Is there a
are.
chance he can retire?
Yeah, it's possible. There's
How?
no
Why-
possible.
why-
But let me
why
tell you
would make
another
him
thing.
retire?
Let me tell you another thing. And contrary to you guys, and I'm happy Museveni does not think like you, Museveni does not think that he cannot be overthrown. One of the reasons why he's not overthrown is because he thinks he can actually be kicked out. So he's always putting in place contingency measures. If, you know, the state of Uganda is very thin on the ground. If you look at the state in America, they have 11 people per every 100 citizens. 11 people employed by government per every 100 citizens. In Uganda, we have about 1.8 or 1.7 government employees per 100 people. If you look at the size of the Ugandan police force, about 45,000. I mean, if you had the 50 riots have crossed different points of Kampala, the police cannot contain it. So if you put 20,000 people on the streets of Kampala, Kaihura will disperse them. If you put 150,000 backed by the army, the police and the army can contain them. If you put 800 to 1 million people for the next 3 weeks in Kampala here, the army and police will join them. So it is that knowledge that if Museveni holds power, it is because his opponents are not sufficiently organized to cause him trouble. And active on a daily basis. The security services, ISO, police, military intelligence are permanently demobilizing the emerging leaders. You see, if there are leaders emerging in Kiseka Market, organizing youth there, Kaihura and CMI and ISO will penetrate them, co-opt those leaders. You know what?
And then the president himself and Betty Kamya go and hand them checks.
Exactly.
There's informal groups.
So what they do, they get those youth leaders, form associations for them, put money into the accounts, 120 million, take them to State House, they meet the president. So what they are able to do is to continually separate the head from the body, leadership from followership. Followership without leadership is ineffective. And it is
leadership without followership is also ineffective.
But so they co-opt the leaders and they demobilize. That is how they are able to demobilize sources of points of resistance. So you need to understand that Museveni works day and night to ensure that the opposition is neutralized. It is not that he holds power and sleeps every night without doing anything.
I hear
hard
you there.
work that is put into mobilization for his side, demobilization of opposition is
let me throw this both on Apito and Timothy. When you see Ruth Nankabirwa has tried twice to hold meetings in her Chivoga district. They've been difficult for her. People have been trying to do meetings to mobilize. You saw the meeting that Isaac Musumba tried to hold in Buzaya, which voted and defeated his push. You've seen interesting meetings in Fort Portal, for example, one called by Margaret Mohanga and the district chairperson and others going one way, and there was another major one today with Alex Ruhonda and Sylvia Rawogo. You have meetings like happened in Runyangabu with Adolf Mwesiga and Peace Mutuzu. There is clear resistance to this. But when the president rallied these troops, didn't allow much discussion about the proposal, the resolutions of the SEC meeting, almost the same for the NEC meeting, not much discussion, and the military coming out with a statement like this. It indicates how he's trying to do the mobilization. How does he, what's the end game?
Well, if we were to go back to the question of where power really is, I think it's very important for us to stand back from all this and understand that after the Second World War, when the decolonization process began, the UN system, I guess from the trauma of the Holocaust and the Second World War, created a moral universe of countries, you know, with all the declaration of Universal Declaration of Human Rights that guarantee the existence of states like Uganda. So that the starting point is countries like Uganda exist at the mercy of the international system, based especially in the Western world. That's the beginning point, the true nerve center of power. That is those countries. If they decide they're going to support Catalonia's independence, then it will get independence. If they decide to oppose it, if they decide they're going to recognize South Sudan, but then not recognize the more stable Republic of Somaliland, so be it. So the true facts of Uganda's power lie with the West. When you go one step further, then there are these like country managers, like the President Museveni and others, who, if they try to be a bit too patriotic and be a bit too, concerned about the people first, the Obotes, and clash with Western capital interests, then of course they get overthrown or undermined. If you're those like President Museveni willing to turn the other cheek and do everything to maintain domestic power by appeasing or not recognizing the West, then of course that person becomes nearly unassailable in terms of power. So that's the reality of Uganda.
But how do you explain people like Mugabe and Zayas who have resisted the Western world and
Exactly. As I said, the Western world will, if they really wanted to do a Libya or an Iraq, and they felt emotionally, self-righteously, whichever reason, they will go against the entire international system, as they did in late 2002, and overthrow a government. So the Mugabes, I think, a halfway position. These are appeasers like the Musevenis who turn a blind eye, have every resource given to them, then you're in power. The Mugabes are resisted, but within the wider sense of the morality of the United Nations system that says you can't interfere in other countries' affairs. So you condemn them morally, attempt to undermine them, but not do like an all-out raid. So Uganda falls under the category of countries that really are just the appeasers. That's where the true power is. So in other words, all this discussion about SEC meetings and Army High Command meetings, once you understand that President Museveni is where these Kabaka Mutesas were in meeting the speaks and grants, and he had the final say, then the rest is just an ETC. So the question now becomes, where can body politic, media, opposition, or whatever else Uganda that supports the Museveni presidency, how and when do they form an alliance with the Western powers and try and find a way to make them see that their interests are in jeopardy with Museveni's continued rule, but not this frontal opposition with mobilizing signatures and whatnot. That's my personal view. The rest of this way is just a waste of time.
Oh, no,
Where
you've been in the countryside over the last few days. What's the situation there, and how do the developments in Entebbe and Kampala impact those?
Well, I mean, on the face of it, it's all quiet, but I guess much of the discussion is still on social media. And I think that's where President Museveni draws his comfort from. He knows that the people may not, as Andrew says, may not support this, but they are not energized enough. There is no adequate resistance, so to say, because I think the only thing that could stop this amendment would be an uprising. It can't be anything else. President Museveni is very alert to the power of the people because he used it, mixed it with arms, but he has not yet found that there is a critical mass of Ugandans. Especially the elite. I mean, like if you have these meetings he has had and nobody speaks out at the risk to either their life or their job, then you can't blame him.
Three people spoke out in Self,
which is a minority.
Mataya Chalgonza.
So at the end of the day,
the youth representative to SEC and a representative from Karamoja.
And what did they say?
No, they tried to raise debate and saying that SEC should have had a more detailed discussion about this.
Yeah, but remember what I said. Also, we are dealing with the politics of desperation. Most of the people who got these meetings, with all due respect, have personal groceries to take care of and what have you. I mean, we don't have a social safety network for most people.
There's an MP here.
So at the end of the day, people make calculations. You go to these meetings, you can either come out empty-handed or with something.
There's an MP here who has sent a message and says, even the people we're consulting need money, and so they play blackmail. Just we can pay them off. Otherwise, majority are in support. If I use intelligence to get their views, But once an MP appears, everyone expects money and plays a game of resistance.
Exactly.
And it says, this particular MP has not called meetings yet. He has only called leaders, and 90 to 100% are in support. And he says, she says, just watch this space because you're organizing big rallies.
The personal view, I think, would be...
But I should tell you this. You know, there are many points of resistance in Uganda. If you look at the youth in Uganda who are angry, they are angry because of, let's say, the economic circumstances. Many people don't have jobs, many people don't have a means of livelihood. The critical issue is not corruption, is not democracy, is not human rights, is not some bigger ideals. Most of these people face existential realities, and these existential realities, they recognize that their interests are best taken care of by working with rather than in opposition to the state. So if Museveni, NRM, MPs, police, whatever institution the state uses to reach them and takes care of their immediate material needs, which are bread and butter issues, they are likely to change. Because you see, amending the constitution to remove age limits is just an ideal. We want an ideal where leaders change, but is that really the existential challenge of Ugandan youth that they are facing? So the opposition always will face that challenge, especially for a deeply entrenched system. Remember that the system of NRM has two layers. One, there is the fusion of the state with the party, and there is the fusion of politics with security. So alongside, if you look at the way the LC system was organized with the Secretary for Security, now you have a Gombora intelligence officer, which is a GISO. And they're trying to create a PISO.
There is a PISO who has been around, the Parish Intelligence Security.
So there is a PISO.
Yes.
But there are all these layers of security. Now there is police, which is also a political arm of the NRM that has been penetrating society deep up to the village level. So they are able to easily detect points of resistance and then meet the needs of the mobilizers there.
And I think that's exactly the reason that the president decided to bring into this meeting of the high command, because the people going to do the actual mobilization are intelligence officers.
But also you look at another thing. General Salim Saleh leads something called the NADS or something.
Operation Wealth Creation.
Operation Wealth Creation. So they will pump money through Operation Wealth Creation, which soldiers, isn't it largely run by soldiers of UPDF who are in the reserve, who are retired and semi-retired and not retired. So you will have the security operation running a political operation. Please, these systems, these armed movements which capture power from the bush, whether you see them in Ethiopia, in Eritrea, in Cuba, in North Korea, in Vietnam, in China. These are very, very difficult systems to fight. And in fact, I feel a lot of sympathy for the opposition because you need exceptional organizational superiority to just even make a dent, not to defeat them.
The difference, Andrew, would be that Cuba, for example, has managed its transition, at least from President Fidel Castro to Raul
49
Castro.
years. This guy has just done 31.
Yes, after
so let's
49
wait
years.
for another 18.
Ethiopia has survived. Ethiopia survived from its revolutionary leader to a new president. Desalegn is now a new prime minister. Desalegn is now in charge. Uganda hasn't seen that, and I think
I think
it's
what I'm saying. Museveni has not yet died. These guys die in office.
Yes.
You see, if you look at all these, whether it is Mao, Ho Chi Minh, Samora Machel, or Robert Mugabe, or Yoweri Museveni, or Meles Zenawi, Isaias Afewerki, these guys die in office. And the one who retired, we know, is only Fidel after 49 years. Museveni is still 18 years away from Fidel's record.
Fidel's 49
yes.
years. But Uganda is not Cuba.
Well, but if you look at them across geographic space and across historic time, they have very particular characteristics. And I think that if you are in the opposition, you're organizing against NRM, do not organize against it as if it is Kaunda's UNIP or Moise Kanu, or these mainstream political parties. These are a very unique character groups. You have them in Rwanda, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, and China, Angola. We have not seen them lose power except in Nicaragua, but now they are back. They were away for a very short time, I think 8 years.
And they came both husband and wife.
Yes, now the
vice president.
The vice president is the wife of the president.
Yes.
The man of the clan. Why do you forget
Herbert Mugisa, Chairman South Division 4 Porto, is watching us and says, responding to the message I read from an MP, he says, that's a naked lie. I have personally moved with Honorable Alex Ruhunda and with a number of leaders in the entire Fort Porto municipality. No one has asked for money. People know the dangers of removing Article 102B. You know, most NRM MPs are not leaders but businessmen and women, period. So they are extracting their own pound in promoting this. And Larry Nesta is watching us, says he's happy that Andrew is on the show. He says he likes your analysis. Someone else here says, for the first time I agree with Mwenda on systems brought by rebels like Museveni. It's almost impossible to beat such systems. Andrew used to be a good political analyst until he reduced himself to a political mercenary. Andrew, you speak for yourself. Who avails himself for being hired to defend anything wrong. Thanks for the debate. And Charles and Honor missed the first part though about police arrest. Andrew, you need to speak to this person. Somebody called Fred. I think he's in Bugwere or somewhere.
Now really, what can I ask?
What can you say?
Yes.
Let me speak for Andrew.
We can discuss the more serious issues. Another thing I wanted to add just before we went to another break is that one of the other characteristics we learn about these armed struggle, post-armed struggle governments is that even when they suffer prolonged economic atrophy, they don't suffer political decay.
Yes,
you look at Mugabe in Zimbabwe or Castro in Cuba for about 20 years, or North Korea, the economy can decline and decline and decline. Now, most governments, when they face economic collapse, the economic decay, it sparks off a political crisis. But these systems don't.
So what facilitates? What
we have not seen them lose power. We have seen once they lost power in Guinea-Bissau for 4 years, but they came back. But largely because, you know, in Guinea-Bissau, Amilcar Cabral, who was the leader of the PAIGC, died 3 days before they captured power. So his brother Raul Cabral is the one
who took over.
So
you'd say the same like happened in South Sudan.
In South Sudan, yes, in South Sudan. But in Nicaragua, because of American pressure, America interfered so much in Nicaragua. But still, it was just short-lived after 8 years.
But just I also want to add, in terms of Uganda, also, I think President Museveni has ably milked the history of the country.
Yes.
Remember, particularly the Amin era, people lost any expectations from government. They only just want the government to leave them alone. So President Museveni has come to have a mix of giving modicums of government delivery. Things like UPE and what you may say they are sloganeering, but they are, at least you can say that government is doing something. Then there is this idea of peace, actual populism, whereby government has left people alone, so they can do their border stuff, all the anarchies in town, in most urban areas. So there is that element of living positively with the situation. You can say you can get along. People get bitter, but they have some
I
ability
think
to
I
let
agree
off.
with you. But the other element that people have discussed is the fact that President Museveni and the NRA made so much promise of a revolution to change that the failure to deliver on that promise makes it difficult for anybody to promise or to mobilize the population along the same lines. You can't tell people, sacrifice, once we get there, this is what we'll achieve, because people haven't seen that. And I think he
But could also not be,
disincentivized it.
it could also be that a lot of the political struggles of Uganda are not rooted in people's existential realities. Let me ask you, because you see sometimes you're very kind also to the opposition, let me ask, how rooted is the opposition in the daily challenges of those it claims to represent? You guys, I want you to go and read Mamudani's book, Politics and Class Formation in Uganda. In that book, Mamudani talks about the formation of cooperative unions to challenge Asian purchase of Ugandan cotton, on coffee, then the bus associations, taxi driver associations. The anti-colonial struggle was really rooted in people's...
But Andrew, you can only organize when you have space to do it.
Did the colonial government desire that space? The space not given.
But it is not.
You are contradicting yourself.
But
You have agreed that the system is so entrenched that even to allow you to organize the way you think the opposition will be, it's impossible.
No, the point I was making is that the system is so highly organized. It would require extraordinary organizational superiority to make a dent, not to defeat it, but to make a dent on it.
But of course, historically, Andrew,
where
I think
mobilizations have where that effort has been undertaken, the system has demobilized them. It is the one that gives money to so-called circles where they exist. It is the one that mediates disputes. Yesterday.
So it means that the system, therefore, you are saying that the system is smart, because you see what I'm saying is that if they're teachers, if they're nurses, medical workers, if they're youth, they're students, all these groups have certain interests. And the way to organize a civic movement is to root it into people's daily existential realities. If they are coffee farmers, if they are cotton farmers. Now, if you try to go there, you'll find NRM there already trying to do exactly what you're trying to promise.
No, but someone will again say that NRM first destroyed these cooperatives where they existed. So
And
you
now,
can't rebuild them. Look at the struggle by Nandala Mafabi and his Bugisu Cooperative Union. One of the...
But you know why he wins the elections in Nandala Mafabi? It's because he has the Bugisu Cooperative Union. In fact, Nandala Mafabi is the greatest example of why the opposition need to root its politics in people's existential realities. I think that standing here in Kampala, articulating emotive issues of democracy, of corruption that will make government better is important and appealing. But let me ask you another thing. Why don't Ugandans... I'll give you an example. President Paul Kagame told me that when they were fighting in the bush, 65% of the contributions to the war effort came from refugees in camps. The refugees in camps felt that their life and future and destiny depended on them raising the last 10,000 shillings. So I asked myself, if the 3.5 million people who voted BSJ, if each one of them subscribed to FDC, just 10,000, FDC would have 3.5 billion. If FDC could raise 3.5 billion, I'm telling you, its ability to mobilize will be very high. Why don't Ugandans who are badly affected by this government not contribute money to a cause to liberate them from either mismanagement and oppression? Why are Ugandans not investing in a cause for their own emancipation? We have to ask ourselves that question.
On which planet would they be doing that?
My friend, people who are oppressed.
Gentlemen, I think, unfortunately, I think we need to move on and discuss a bit of Kenya.
Let me tell you just, if Ugandans, we elites in Uganda and in Africa and in FDC and in UPC, ask these questions, how can we make the ordinary Ugandan who sells maize and groundnuts by the roadside, how can they feel like there is a stake for them to raise 10,000 and hand it over to FDC and say mobilize? And you raise 5 million of those Ugandans. That would be a game changer. Because Ugandans must invest in the change they want. The fact that they're not doing so, it means either they don't trust the opposition politicians, and therefore they are also opportunistic.
We need to move on, unfortunately. But I would have referred you to the money that was being given to Besigye during his last campaign. Where was that coming from?
But how much money did he raise? He got 3.5 million.
But his argument would be the gesture, the fact that...
The gesture, yes. The willingness is there, so what demobilizes it? Or why do the opposition fail?
It's a very good point. Okay, after the election, why can't he continue to receive that money?
Yes, no, I think FTC tried the other time, but they were done in by a telecom service provider who took away all the money because they wanted to raise as little as 500 shillings via mobile money. And the telecom was taking 300 shillings, so they would have nothing.
But also, Andrew,
but we need to move on. I'm afraid we need to move on. And I'm afraid we're not able to take phone calls tonight. I've taken some of the messages. I have seen a message from Bernard Mpairwe in, I think, Rubaga. I've seen your message. And Asmani Bisika says he made a prophecy a few years ago. He thinks it will come true that President Yoweri Museveni will not be on the ballot in 2021. Someone else here says, I knew Andrew would run away from my post because it has hit him.
So Fred,
I don't think we need to be
there may be no ballot, so why would you be?
The guy who was saying Museveni, yes,
Yes.
Museveni every week sends me $10 million. So that's why I have to stand here and defend him. Thank you. So I can confirm to you, I am bribed by Museveni. At night he sends me money. Sacks of money come to my house.
Before we go to the next topic, to get someone
so that the guy can get his satisfaction.
No, seriously, there's a. I wanted to defend Andrew earlier.
I don't need defense.
No, Andrew, okay.
I think we need to really move on. We don't have to go back. The stories about Andrew, he's been battling them on social media and on his
but
posts
he doesn't know
and
how to
elsewhere.
defend himself.
The guy has said Museveni has bribed me. I admit, please, I want to make this clear. I admit Yoweri Museveni has bribed me.
Yes, you pick regular checks from Kampala and Kigali and everywhere, so everybody has been giving you money. Okay, but we need to move on. Gentlemen, Kenya has gone through its second election as ordered by the Supreme Court. For the last 2 days, there's been some kind of, the tensions are not as bad as they were in the immediate aftermath of the election on the 26th of October. Today is 29th, but 27th was a bit tense, 28th and today hasn't been as tense as it is. Is Kenya out of the woods? Starting with Anapito.
Well, it depends what you mean. I suspect maybe tomorrow Uhuru will again be declared winner.
Surprised he hasn't been declared yet?
Yeah, but I think it won't be out of the woods in terms of really Odinga and team being able to agitate and perhaps to keep paralyzing. Of course, there's likely to be another court case, and the court may again find reason to nullify the results. So I don't think they're out of the woods. There is even a possibility that there will be a real secession attempt in Kenya, because I think the people in Nyanza and General Western are so bitter. There was supposed to be
a repeat election in some of the counties where it was suspended on Saturday, but it didn't happen.
People have died, and the bitterness is simply so deep.
Timothy, Raila Odinga promised that there would be no other election. He mobilized for a boycott, and by every account so far, I think the IEBC, the Election and Borders Commission, was announcing yesterday that if you do proper collation, they were short of 50% turnout in this election. 33% is the number we're working with, but they say if you collected it according to the number of voters or something like that, you'd come up to about 40-something%. You wouldn't go up to 50%. If Uhuru gets declared, will he lead a legitimate and legal Kenya, and what does that mean for the politics?
No, it becomes one of these unfortunate situations like Uganda 1985, an election so openly or at least so emotionally disputed or perceived to have been disputed or whichever way you explain it, that sort of situation. Because remember, this professor of Makerere of history, Professor Mwambutsa
Ndebesa,
made an important point on one of those radio stations yesterday when he said that in Kenya, okay, in terms of numbers, demographically, Uhuru Kenyatta, William Ruto have the Kalenjin and the Bantu leaning, the Mount Meru, that Mount Kenya sort of like support. Geographically, Raila Odinga's support stretches from the Indian Ocean coast of Mombasa to Western Kenya. There's a lot of that support in Western Kenya, a lot of it in Nairobi. So it's a strange country where it's like Raila Odinga and William Ruto seem to win America's equivalent of winning New York, let's say Texas, Florida, and California, and then
so you run across.
Yes. So the fact that Kenyatta's support is concentrated in very high population areas in the center and the Rift Valley, and geographically Raila Odinga can claim that across geography of Kenya, And then all this fact of the Supreme Court annulling the election, then this very low turnout that makes the point of but why, in other words, it almost seems to give so much moral support to the case of Raila Odinga. Now, finally, it's very, very difficult to argue that Raila Odinga is a sore loser, and very hard to argue that Kenya, as it presently is constituted, is a legitimate state. So, in other words, if you're looking for the pretext of creating a guerrilla war, or at least a resurrection of a Mau Mau kind of insurgency, many people who voted for Raila Odinga, who support him, can morally now walk with their heads high and feel Uhuru Kenyatta a legitimate president, and it's so hard to argue that way. So, in other words, Kenya is a state where, because Kenya is like a client state like Uganda, there will be so much patching up. Kenya can go on. There's just sufficient business interest, enough apathy to keep it going, but it will be a festering wound that never gets solved. And as we learned in the 1990s, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire, once, these are countries that have secondary schools about 70 years older than our Namliangos, Gayazas, Budos. They went into civil war. So Kenya is like a Pakistan. One of these, the center is nuclear weapons, big economy, but you always feel at the fringe there are Taliban or militants. That's a powerful, strong central state, but dysfunctional at the fringes.
Andrew, how does Uhuru run a government robbed of legitimacy, at least by the boycott mobilized by Raila Odinga?
Well, I want to take you slightly backward, because me and you had a debate on this matter.
Yes.
I think that the worst mistake the Supreme Court of Kenya did was to annul an election. And perhaps the lesson you learn is, I hope Maraga and his naive judge, either they were selfish and they wanted to go down in history, destroy their country but they create a name for themselves, or they were idealistic.
They were selfless.
Or they were idealistic and therefore blind to the realities of a poor country with fragile institutions. Because the question was, if you annul an election, what guarantee do you have that the next election will be free of the irregularities or the ills you saw in the first one? And if those ills are repeated in the second election, are you going to annul it? And if you annul it, how many elections are you going to annul? Because it's very difficult in a poor country like that to have perfect elections. So here is what I see in Kenya. One, you have voter turnout which is going to be about 33 to 38%. So Uhuru maximum will get 7 million, less than what he got in the
Yes, but in terms of percentage win, he has 98%.
He has 98%, but it doesn't change anything. Now, what Raila was trying to show, this re-election has been 100 times worse than the first. 70 people have died in this re-election. There has been more violence. In fact, right now, one of the reasons they're not announcing results is the fear by so many people that actually they want to rig the votes in order to give Uhuru some more votes.
Yeah, because his numbers now are below what he got in the last, in the last election.
Yes, it means the other time he could have added. And no one is going even to believe that this new tally is correct, because the French company, which was supposed to transmit the results, said there was no time to do it. The reforms the Supreme Court ordered were not done. The faith in the electoral process in Kenya is so low. You know, the Kenyans are so heavily on social media than compared to us. You know, Kenya has the highest access to internet of any country in Africa, and among the top in the world. They have 70-80% access. So if you go on their Twitter handles, you can see the debate. There's very low faith in this.
But
so this is what I expect, that the losers are going to go back to the same Supreme Court. Either the judges will be intimidated from hearing the case, in which case the government can only be sworn in through an illegality. And if that illegality does not happen, the likely thing is that the Supreme Court will annul the election. If they annul the second election, I can promise you there will be no third election for fear of violence, because Jubilee supporters now will also join on the streets to demonstrate against the Supreme Court. Then Uhuru will be forced, with the support of the army, to order martial law. And if they order martial law, that could pull that country towards Syria. So we must get very...
For me, on the contrary, what I think that stalemate, if it
finish.
happens, the force
solution
will be a unity government. This is what
Okay,
Kenya
so
needs.
let me come to the
Nothing
final
else.
argument I want to make. The solution to the Kenyan crisis is actually the formation of a government of national unity. But here's the problem. You know, Uhuru does not have much control over the system there. Ruto does. Uhuru is always high on weed, if not on whiskey.
You're choosing a president of a country.
But let me tell you this.
Yes.
Let me tell you
on
this.
national TV.
A person like Ruto who worked closely with Raila. Remember that in 2008, 2007 election,
Yes.
Raila and Ruto were together. Are you aware? And the other side was Uhuru and Kibaki. So But this is what the many Kenyans who are opposed to Raila believe. They believe that Raila is using the huge support base he has in Western Kenya and in Nyanza province and in the coastal areas to literally blackmail those who win with violence in order to force a government of national unity. And they feel like in yielding to a government of national unity, you're allowing a loser to dictate the terms of the government. And there is such a strong feeling in the Jubilee that we should not accept power sharing because that is surrender to blackmail. That, please, it is unlikely that Jubilee will accept the government of national unity.
Yes.
So Kenya is on the, I wrote a post on Facebook when this ruling was issued. On September 1st, I wrote a post. It was called, "The Supreme Court of Kenya has opened a Pandora's box." So now we are in a Pandora's box.
You see, I think where your analysis falls short is that this is a country that only 10 years ago had a fallout. It had nothing to do with a ruling of the Supreme Court or any court for that matter. 1,200 people died. Now you're talking about 70 dead, 69, 70 dead so far. But the country has learned its lessons from doing a bad election 10 years ago.
Well,
If you realize that every actor today, be it Jubilee or NASA, or even the Supremes, they are playing a lot more carefully than they did before. Maybe long term for Kenya, short term there might be some trouble, but long term for Kenya, will they learn lessons on how to manage the elections better?
Actually,
You're going to an election.
Are very different.
You're going to an election.
Just a moment.
Just a
The
moment.
other, Kibaki was sworn in.
On
Do you know why
8
there was
August.
violence?
Yes.
Do you know why there was violence in 2000? Kibaki was sworn in before results were announced.
Yes,
That is
because
why.
they couldn't announce the results.
But the problem I fault the Supreme Court
Yes.
with here is that here you had an election that was properly announced. Two, international election observers, the AU, the African Union, the EU, from the United States, the Carter Center, but most importantly, there were Kenyan local organizations which were tallying the results. And they produced tallies that were consistent with those of the Electoral Commission. But the Supreme Court did not say that the results were wrong. It said that the electronic transmission of results did not meet the procedures prescribed in the law. It was not, they never contested the outcome. They contested the technicality of transmission of results.
Yes,
to annul an election on such a technicality, I felt that the Supreme Court of Kenya
but you know
was
what?
acting with gross
Everybody who goes to court chooses their best case, the best case they can make. So the fact that the petitioners and the Supreme Court narrowed their focus to one issue, which was the transmission of results, doesn't mean there were not other problems with the election. But you make your best case. I'll give you an example.
But if I was the Supreme Court,
I'll give you an
I would
example.
not annul an election
Yes,
because of the way
I'll give you an
it was
example.
transmitted.
The electoral petition against Peter Sematimba. He won it on appeal. But the initial petition to court, people were wondering, there were so many other things wrong with that election in Busiro. Why did they choose Sematimba's academic qualifications? Because when you're making your case, you need to find your strongest point where you can swing. You can get the attention.
So for me, I just want to make my point about Kenya. I know we're about to wind up. I think what Kenya shows, and maybe it's a lesson Uganda will learn when we eventually go to when there's no strong man and you can have some kind of elections, is that in poor countries where control of government is everything, even where a community perceives that because they have people in government, they are eating, winner take it all is not going to work.
I agree.
Winner take it all will not work. Even in Uganda, within our own disputed democracy, the fact that someone gets 30-something% and he has no role in government at all, and you know that being in government means everything. You lose, you are out. Imagine Odinga, who is so close to Kenyatta, has no role. He cannot determine the appointment, and yet his community feels they also want to see their people. I think Africa, if ever it's to settle, needs to abandon winner take it all.
And Peter, you are opposed to the system in Rwanda. The constitution of Rwanda says, regardless of the numerical strength, a winning party, listen to the constitution of Rwanda, regardless of how many votes any party that wins the election, the presidential candidate gets, 50% of cabinet positions have to go to other political parties. You can only take 50% of cabinet. So they have entrenched power sharing in the constitution.
I think that is problematic, because if the
Why is
president
it
won
big?
with almost 99% of the vote, where do you find that opposition to raise the 50%? It doesn't exist. So it's
Actually in Rwanda,
No,
the
it's-
other opposition parties right now,
Uh-huh.
the other political parties, let's not call even them opposition
Yes,
parties, the other
may-
political
maybe.
parties
Uh-huh.
that exist in Rwanda have 50% of cabinet.
yes, they have 50%.
So that is why in Rwanda, unlike where here in Uganda you see people leaving opposition to go to the ruling party, many people in Rwanda leave the ruling party to go to other parties because there are higher chance when you are there to get a slot.
Moreover, Charles, let's stay with Kenya.
Yes.
I think there is also people who argue that when Odinga and Kibaki were having that coalition, which was forced, that's when Kenya is seen to have truly tried to
Exactly, to do a lot of
transform,
things.
because there were checks and balances.
Yes.
So I don't know.
And
I don't
yes,
know.
Tim.
So those who are putting pressure on the Kenyan protagonists,
But
that
on a put,
must
and he also goes to the
Timothy.
movement system which Museveni had
I think they have announced some kind of resistance
yeah,
movement in Kenya.
Odinga is already
Odinga has
supporting the
announced.
movement.
Timothy, let me come back to you. Do you think Odinga can go back to the arrangement post 2007, 2008?
I think to pick up from what Other Peter said, which is why I disagree with Andrew about the Supreme Court. There is something Jesus Christ said in the Bible: you shall know the truth shall set you free. Sounds very simple, Sunday schoolish, but that's just it. No matter how long, how much you pretend, how much you try and patch up things, keep that under the ground, eventually something gives. We just must sit down and begin to think in the 21st century at a very philosophical level. What is Africa? What is its future? What's its status in the world order? For how long shall we continue being dependent on Chinese manufacturing, Western goods and all this? And also then the models. Considering, like what Ana Peter just said, that it's always winner take all, and it's not mere winner take all as it is in the Western world, but it is winner takes everything, loser is disgraced, is indebted, and everything. You must understand your society, it's time for leaders, philosophical thinkers. Everything snaps. We began with the internet in the 1990s with the idea of anyone can say anything, share, do anything. Now, reality caught up with the Americans. When the Russians are alleged to have booked adverts that swung the election, now it's so you can't have the internet as it was viewed in the mid-90s. Then two, these recent adverts that appeared on the, alongside, contentious material, and companies began putting up on YouTube and Facebook. You remember that scandal? So now, because of that, Facebook and Google, under all this regulatory pressure, are beginning to take us back to stage. Okay, it's not just freedom to say anything. And one of these days, for these people who keep attacking
Hashtag fake news.
yes, time is going to come now when it's going to, okay, the internet, as wild and free as it is, needs a minimum regulation. One of these days, you're going to see Facebook introducing a button maybe under posts. Some of these posts, no comments, or a delayed period, as it is with adverts now, where you make a comment and there's like a 15-minute delay, and then do you want to send this comment again? In other words, there's some correction on the internet. So even with Uganda, you're going to see, and Kenya, Ethiopia, Rwanda, wherever it is, we shall break down, which is why I think that the Kenyan Supreme Court was right. If you people say you want to have a world-class election, have a world-class election, and Andrew have disagreed with you on this, let's follow the letter of the law. If you are going to enter your ATM, you're going to have to do that PIN number. If it fails, fine, just learn to keep your PIN number elsewhere. But this idea of these things don't work for us. Andrew, you're going to have to remember the password to your phone, just as simple as that. Have someone else, your auntie, have it. But this idea of we fear the worst, to hope a Supreme Court can rule politically or rule legally, bear in mind political consequences. No, the Supreme Court is to rule according to the law. Let the politicians.
I think Andrew.
Karl Popper said something so fundamental. He said that human society is inherently imperfect, and perfect institutions are impossible to create. So we have to content ourselves with an imperfect society and imperfect institutions, but which are capable of infinite improvement. I am, of all the Western countries, are much more versed with the United States. Anyone who has studied electoral processes in America from 1788, that's the first election they had, 1788, ran between George Washington and John Adams, who later became his vice president. Today, American elections have been characterized by a lot of corruption, bribery, stealing of votes, stuffing of ballot boxes. But the American democratic system has grown through those mistakes. You should know what happened in Chicago in the election between Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Nixon could have gone to court and challenged the victor of Kennedy. We saw in 2000. This is after 250 years, 2000 election.
Yeah, but you know that when Nixon tried to manipulate an electoral process himself, it ended up losing his own presidency.
In the 1960 election,
yes,
Nixon was vice president. He ran against Senator John Kennedy. He lost Kennedy, but there had been a lot of rigging by the Democrats in Chicago, in the state of Illinois. That's how he lost. In 2000, we saw the case of Bush, which actually went to court, and the court refused
in Florida
to allow in Florida to allow recounting. So it is not true that the democracies we see in the West did not go through a process of bad elections until they perfected them. But the Supreme Court did not.
So what why don't you want the court to be part of the mechanism of perfecting?
Yes.
And why must we refer if we...
I believe that if the court again rules against Zuru, it will even perfect Kenyan elections.
And let me tell you,
but can I tell you, because the elections are run by, first of all, let me finish my point, Charles. One of the reasons I am against annulling an election is based on two premises. One, that what is the injury you are trying to cure? So it is malpractices. Then the challenge is, does the repeat of an election cure those malpractices? Because if there is an improvement, then the annulment is good. In the case of Kenya, which all of us had predicted, is that the next round tends to produce a worse outcome, a worse election than the one that you cancelled.
That's easy to understand. You see, progressively, I think the decision of the Supreme Court is fundamental into getting Kenya to a better electoral process than just saying, like they say, cover the West and then we can continue picking our mushrooms in the West.
My own view.
Just a moment. You see, Kenya went through an election in 2007, December 2007. It resulted in a lot of mayhem. They have been struggling to improve those electoral processes. They've gone through an election in 2017. The Supreme Court has annulled it, and they have held a repeat election 60 days later. It might be worse, but the reaction and the attention of the Kenyan people, someone is correcting me that we tend to call it Kenya when it's Kenya. The Kenyan people, whether they are in the courts of law, or the political parties, or the populace, are saying we need to do better. And I think that's fundamental for democracy in the long run. If you're looking at short term, an election between 8th August and 26th October, yes, there might be problems. But if you're projecting the next election and the election after that, I think Kenya is on a better path.
And just going by the turnout in this election, it would actually mean that Kenyans want another election.
Yes,
most of them
because they're communicating. They're telling you.
They want another election.
Guys, let me make my
and the Supreme Court may listen to them.
Guys, let me
they
make
want
my
another
pitch.
election.
First, in all fairness, I wish that your analysis and projections are correct, because future generations of Kenyans will be happy that Andrew Mwenda was wrong, Charles was right. But this is my suspicion. In fact, the Supreme Court ruling against the election could tempt Kenyan members of parliament, which they have already done anyway. Why am I saying should tempt them? To say, oh, a Supreme Court can act like this. They will go and begin passing. Two things are going to happen. The next president appointing a judge, whether it is Raila or Uhuru, will now choose the most partisan judge. That is one, in order to neutralize, because don't remember that every action causes equal and opposite reaction. So the first reaction of a politician is, I must have a stooge as a Chief Justice. So the independent, powerful judge, they begin to disappear and the Supreme Court gets compromised. The second is Parliament passing laws reducing the security of tenure of judges. Three, amending the Constitution to even undermine or even eliminate the role of the Supreme Court in adjudicating of elections. My own experience, again using American history, is that the Supreme Court of America is very powerful. Why? Because it has understood that it plays a judicial function. It has consistently tried to avoid, even in the rulings they stated, decisions
but
that
Andrew,
can have consequences that threaten politicians.
But Andrew, don't forget that statement the protesters, in a placard they had in Nairobi. Yes, Kenya is not Uganda. Kenya is not even America.
Yes.
And all the things you are fearing will be resisted.
And I think
They will resist.
But they have already, do you know that they have passed a law?
And now there's a resistance.
Do you know that the current parliament,
which law is
No,
not
but you see-
effective
but you see,
in
Andrew,
deciding the outcome of the
I
of this
think
election?
it really
but
doesn't matter what.
I'm saying that the politicians now, Jubilee has about 3 votes less of 2/3 majority in parliament. So if they can buy a few other non-Jubilee members, they can go and amend the constitution in order to undermine the
No,
power
I
of the
think what
Supreme Court,
Odinga
because
said when they defeated the Moi dictatorship, that was about it. They don't want to go back to that. And I think Kenyans are determined not to.
Yes,
And also,
yes,
Charles,
yes,
just come
Timothy.
just briefly. And I sent you a text once when we were discussing this. At the political heads of state
check
level,
the 2 laws they
No,
passed recently.
yes, but at the head of state level, you have a bit of a point. You might say, okay, if the courts are going to be that consequential, then we're going to start basically creating like sectarian or partisan judges. But remember, I told you, but at a much lower level. Think of the psychological effect on Kenyans across the board in matters much less sensitive politically, land disputes, traffic incidents. Just think of the thought that the Supreme Court could announce this election. Think of how much the prestige of the judiciary in Kenya, in very ordinary matters, copyright and everything else, is going to be. So on one hand, it creates a situation of political tension at the very top, but in routine matters of court. Next time the magistrate says, I've ruled that piece of land belongs to Charles, you're going to feel, well, these people could overturn the election. In other words, there's so many pros and negatives, but my view is still the argument of this powerful company called Amazon. In Amazon.com, that company, that online retailer, you make a mistake, you order a book, or let's say you order a camera from Amazon, it's supposed to go to you, let's say in Bugolobi, ends up in Jinja. You, the employee who made that mistake with the address, is taken off work for like about 2 weeks. You are told to go routine back and forth, do it again and again and again, so that mistake is never repeated. Never, there's no such thing as, well, imperfections happen, they take you off, pay you, but you must make sure
that you do it right.
So I think we must, in this era, with a country like Kenya that has the highest per capita penetration of the internet in Africa, with all this talk of the Savannah, what is it, the Savannah Valley and whatnot. Let's be scientific. Let's go into
Gentlemen, I'm afraid our time is
Remember,
up. We need to get out of here.
Odinga's statement a day before the elections, he said their action is about saving not just Kenya, but saving Africa. He believes strongly that Kenya must make the difference.
No, I think the
this
psychological
Africa statement, he feels is not right.
The psychological effect this has, long term, and Andrew, your analysis I think falls short on placing the Kenyan people into this whole discussion. Are they going to accept the nonsense of elected representatives deciding laws the way they want to suit their own interests? If the population is going to resist,
he discussed something. You see, the supporters of Jubilee think that the Supreme Court should change them. There is no unanimity of respect.
Yes.
You see, in many countries, because of the ethnic fractionalization of our countries, is that a decision of the Electoral Commission that favors Uhuru will not achieve sexual legitimacy from the supporters of NASA, and vice versa. You get it? So it is not that Kenyans will accept. Kenyans are not univocal. Kenyans are multivocal, and in their ethnic support for particular candidates, they may not see the value of the Supreme Court now. You see, the people of the Chukuya, the Kalenjin may realize that having an independent Supreme Court is best when they're out of power. But when they're in power, I can promise you they're going to make laws to cripple.
I agree with you, but you see, that's
exactly
exactly what makes the significant difference. Where you have almost a 50%, then you're going to have better democracy. In America, people talk about American democracy, which we're discussing here. You will never have an election where the margin between the loser and the winner is 20%. It's 47. It's 47.
In 1824,
yes.
James Monroe ran against John Quincy Adams, the son of the second president. He won by 98.2%.
That was how long ago?
How recent can you?
Well,
how long ago?
They had been independent for more than 60 years.
Yes, but how long ago?
24.
By then the slaves were not voting. So.
the key thing,
but Reagan in 1984 didn't he win 97%?
You can win electoral colleges, but the popular vote, where the actual votes are counted, it's 47-51. 49 point something, 49 point something. You don't have a wage gap where someone is the winner takes it all.
One against Le Pen in 2002.
That's because of the reaction against the possibility of a far right. But Andrew, to go to your point, okay, let's just say best case scenario, the Supreme Court had ruled in the way you want. Yes, the election was flawed, but for the wider stability of Kenya, let's let it go, as they do in Uganda and other places.
And they have done it in the previous election.
But will that have changed the realities we see? In other words, whichever way you explain it, Odinga will still have many people who feel the sentiment, Jaramogi Odinga, Robert Owoko's mysterious death, Tom Mboya, that feel we Luo are persecuted people, were underclass. That sentiment will not go away, even if the Supreme Court had done what anyway is typical in Africa. So in other words, we must be honest. Let's time now in Africa for true political
gentlemen, our time is out. We need to get out of here. Thank you very much for making time for the show. Thank you very much to you, all our viewers. Wafulo Good to send us a message. Leslie Amanzuru Williams sent us a message. Wamboga Mugiria sent us a message. And the many others of you who have sent in messages. I'm not able to take them tonight. Maybe, yes. And let me just take one message from Nicholas Sengova, who says, Kenya shows that we need serious soul searching. Is this one man, one vote system the best way to choose the president? Isn't there another way? Tell Mwenda that the process, just a moment. Tell Mwenda that the processes of appointing judges in Kenya is very elaborate and the president does not have a free rein in that process. So appointing partisan judges does not stand.
This is not Uganda.
Kenya is not Uganda. I keep calling it Kenya. Kenya is not Uganda. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Our time is up. We need to get out of here. Have a good night.